Well, let's get the business news for you now. Kate Moody's here with us in the studio. And Kate, trade is the word of the week, isn't it? Another major deal signed in the US today.
Yeah, absolutely. Not quite signed yet, but on its way to the White House anyway. Yeah. Of course, Wednesday was all about the US and China. Thursday is now focusing on the North American free trade deal, or the successor to it anyway. US senators have voted 89-10 in favor of the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, or USMCA. It was negotiated to replace the 1990s NAFTA. President Donald Trump is expected to sign that bill into law very quickly. The agreement addresses issues like labor costs, but critics say it falls short on dealing with climate change. The International Trade Commission projected in April that the trade agreement would boost the economy by $68 billion and add 176,000 jobs within 6 years of taking effect. Senators said it was a major victory for the White House.
The United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is a major achievement for President Trump and a very big bipartisan win for the American people.
The European Union's trade chief, meanwhile, has criticized the Phase 1 trade deal that was struck between Washington and Beijing. Trade Commissioner Phil Hogan said the economic benefits were limited, and he accused the U.S. president of seeking to bolster public support ahead of November's elections. Now, he made those rather controversial remarks while in Washington for a series of talks about another series of brewing trade spats. Washington has threatened to impose tariffs on 2.4 billion euros worth of French imports if Paris doesn't roll back attacks on tech companies. Separately, Germany has confirmed reports that the U.S. is also threatening to target European cars with tariffs if EU governments continue to back the Iran nuclear deal. Well, in yet another dispute, the U.S. is planning to decide whether to increase tariffs on 7.5 billion euros of European goods, part of a World Trade Organization punishment for unfair subsidies for the plane maker Airbus. Washington initially levied tariffs of 25%, but could increase them to as much as 100%. And that's worrying wine sellers in the U.S., some of whom are stocking up just in case. Solange Mougin has this story.
An American love affair with French wines that has hit a rough patch in the form of tariffs. They've already added 25% to the cost of a bottle of French wine in the U.S. And Donald Trump has threatened to up that tariff to 100%, a possibility that French winemakers aren't the only ones worried about. The U.S. Distillery Council said some 78,000 U.S. jobs are at risk.
It's going to directly impact the small businesses in America and also the customers. So we're all going to lose big, and maybe a lot of businesses will close for something completely not related to food and wine.
The current tariffs were levied after the World Trade Organization said the U.S. was allowed to slap tariffs on $7.5 billion worth of European products. The ruling came after 15 years of litigation, in which the U.S. said the EU was unfairly subsidizing airplane maker Airbus, a larger dispute that wine importers say could sink their business.
We are frantically air freighting wine from France. 100% tariff will kill our business.
The largest foreign market for French wines, the U.S. imports some 700 million euros worth every year, not to mention Spanish and German bottles that have also been hit by tariffs. European and American negotiators have given themselves until the end of the month to work out a deal to avoid another tariff hike, one that could otherwise make drinking French wine an unaffordable luxury.
Well, global markets have largely welcomed that trade deal between the U.S. and China. We've seen Wall Street soaring to new highs once again. The Dow Jones well above that 29,000 mark, which it passed for the first time just this week. The S&P 500, meanwhile, has broken above 3,300 for the first time. Shares of Morgan Stanley are up around 8% as the investment bank beat expectations with its fourth quarter earnings. A bit more caution on the major European indices. We saw just the CAC 40 finishing slightly higher there. The London FTSE 100 down about 0.4% at the close. Germany has said it will phase out coal power over the next 18 years. The government has agreed to pay out compensation to companies and regions that will be the most affected. Environmental activists have urged an even faster transition. Sam Bradpeace reports.
Once the heartlands of German industry, the country's coal regions have fallen on hard times as Europe's biggest economy moved away from heavy industry and towards renewables. Now the government is pushing to eliminate coal-fired power plants by 2038, if not sooner.
We're the first country that's getting rid of nuclear and coal power on a binding basis. This sends an important international message.
So how is the German government shutting down these operations, particularly in the less prosperous east where lignite or brown coal mining is a much-needed source of income? The answer is money. The government has struck a €40 billion deal with 4 regions to compensate for economic losses. On top of this, heavily polluting coal-fired power plants in western Germany will receive €2.6 billion for an early shutdown, while €1.75 billion would go to plants in the east. Brown coal generates about 19% of the country's electricity, but is considered the most polluting type of coal, partly because its low energy density means greater quantities must be burnt. With coal and nuclear on the way out, Germany must make up the shortfall with increased natural gas and renewable production. Environmental campaigners are worried that in the midst of a climate breakdown, 2038 is too late to stop burning coal, noting that a new plant is due to be built this year.
The European Investment Bank has approved €50 million in funding for the ride-hailing app Bolt. The service, which is based in Estonia, is seen as a European challenger to Uber. Uber itself is facing growing opposition in European cities. The EIB described Bolt as a good example of European excellence in tech and innovation. It's allowed to operate in London, where Uber has been effectively banned. Well, the ride-hailing market now falls under the purview of the EU's competition chief, Margaret Vestager. She's overseeing digital policy, and she says that it's important to continue reforming to adapt to emerging technology.
Because sometimes people tend to think that I have this magic pen where I define the market, but really it's consumers and businesses who define the market by their behavior. And we want to make sure that we get that right in modern times, because also business behavior, customer behavior, that changes in a digital world.
Certainly a very powerful woman here in Europe, and one with quite a lot on her plate.
Absolutely, very busy indeed. All right, Kate, thank you very much indeed. Kate Moody there. We're going to take a short break. Don't go away.